thank you so much, Isaac. It was great. And, you know, what a brilliant crossover with everything that we've just heard from.
It was a good final quarter.
Yeah, brilliant.
Hit the point home.
Yes.
All about words. So, I mean, it does kind of show, Stephanie, right? I mean, words are more important than ever. Mm-hmm. And yet you never hear about ninja copywriters or rock star copywriters. Is it a really thankless task? I mean, is it like, you know, is good copy invisible? Are we not supposed to notice?
Yes, we're not supposed to notice that copy is there. The goal of the copywriter is to remain invisible. The goal of any writer is to remain invisible. You don't want there to be an author, like you don't want to hear the writer talking. You just want the information to be presented in the best way possible, which then I think the problem with that then is that people don't understand that there is a lot of thought and strategy that goes behind crafting this copy. It's not as easy and as intuitive as just you know, write it as you would say it.
Just write some words.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. And good copywriters are efficient, and they are behind the scenes. They work with a lot of people, but their goal is not to be out there. Their goal is to have the information speak, you know, to have the copy and the content speak for itself.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't understand how long it takes to get to something that is short and to the point and just like hits it just right. It takes a really long time.
If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Aaron, it's great that you're getting us excited about VUI, right? Voice user interfaces. But isn't there a danger in getting us too excited? And that if the hype is too much, so you mentioned that voice interfaces starting in the 80s, and I remember when the Ghostbusters game for the ZX Spectrum came out, and it was promising like realistic human voice, and this is what it gave us.
Yeah.
And you know that was pretty disappointing. So
every time I started up Blades of Steel on the Nintendo, that was awesome. Blades of Steel.
So you see what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like we're promised HAL 9000.
Right. And I mean, it'll come. I mean, things just keep getting better and better. I mean, it's amazing to me to just listen to the differences between, I mean, I threw a couple of different screen readers in there. Unfortunately, I didn't have my Echo with me, so I couldn't capture Alexa saying some things. But to listen to the evolution of the digitized voices, like Alexa sounds like a person sometimes. And the fact that Amazon not only is empowering their products, but is enabling that to be used by other products. And I think they're aiming mainly at like the IoT world, but I mean, it could be integrated into anything. It could potentially be integrated into an app. It could be integrated into your website. Whatever it is that you want to do, you can start to tap into that stuff. And I mean, I feel the same way about Siri and Cortana. And I hate saying Google now. I feel like they need to come up with a better like name for their assistant. But you know, Google now.
HAL.
Yeah.
Robin, when you were talking about the mobile web best practices, I've read it and I've seen it many times. And I always think, it's a great document, but they could probably take out the word mobile. And in that everything that's listed there is just best practices. And now I'm kind of wondering if, let's say the W3 should come out with voice interface best practices. It's just best practices, right? This is just getting straight to it. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm kicking myself for not mentioning Alexa as well, because that's an obvious example. You know, I mentioned that Moto hint, that little peanut that you stick in your ear. But absolutely, the voice interface has got huge potential. And I think we're seeing huge progress. I mean, Moore's Law, I think definitely it's applying here in this arena as well. My synthesizers, they're both from the vocalizer expressive range on my machine, on my laptop, and on my phone. Anyone who's got an iPhone with iOS 9, bring up the English Siri lady voice, and you know that to me is like the pinnacle of. I think we've arrived with the speech, and as far as the sort of AI side of it, that's improving in leaps and bounds as well. And you know there was a recent article or news item where a program actually passed the Turing test. So you know we're not here yet. Siri can be incredibly frustrating, as can Google now and Cortana. But when it works, it's so brilliant. And for people that have an additional requirement, you know, to be able to cut through the chase and get intelligence kind of on your side and things magically delivered to you just through voice or very, very simple interactions is hugely empowering.
And I guess we've been here before where we've been told or promised technologies and frankly they suck. and they continue sucking for a while, and then suddenly one day they don't suck anymore, like touchscreens or mobiles. And if you hadn't been prepared for, that deluge, you kind of caught napping, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually been really interesting to me. I've found selling accessibility has been easier to companies because I talk to them about, like, if you think about this now, you're actually going to be really well set up to take advantage of this stuff in the future. So, like, if you're an investment company that maybe doesn't, like, they'd like to be doing accessibility, their heart's in the right place, but they really can't find the budget dollars for it for some reason. So I'm like, well, people are going to want to be able to check, like, how their portfolio is doing via voice. So the sooner you get this stuff in there, the sooner you're going to be able to enable that to happen at very low cost, because you've already taken care of that experience.
Yeah, and again, coming back to how do I convince, trying to convince someone that you should use good semantics or labels and form fields, not because then it will work better in an older browser, but then you'll be set up for what's coming in the future. Can I get a show of hands who's got questions here? All right, we've got at least one. Anybody? Okay, we've got a few. Good. Then I think we'll start into some questions. So we'll get a microphone down here to the front.
So thank you for talking about content. One of the things that wasn't touched on was grammar and punctuation and those sorts of things. One of the things I observe is just the quality of writing, particularly on social media, is pretty poor in that regard. And it strikes me that the people joining the workforce's ability with those things in English is kind of reducing. I'm just wondering if the panel have any thoughts on whether that is in fact a problem or if it's just me. And if it is, what could be done about it?
So should the kids get off as lawn, or?
Well, I tend to pay a lot of attention to grammar and syntax, so I am of the belief that you should utilize good grammar and good syntax. It is a challenge to write, especially when it comes to social media. The challenge is writing in 140 characters, and also somebody's brand voice might call for shortening words or not using punctuation. So that depends. If it's intentional and it's only limited to certain mediums, I think it's fine. But if you see it across, if you see that it goes beyond social and ads, and it goes into web copy, and it goes into emails and long form copy, articles and blog posts, then that is a problem, because then you're not positioning yourself as an expert or as a thought leader, right? Like, when people see your copy, they see an extension of you, of your brand, of what you're selling, of what you're offering them, of what you're showing them. So having good grammar and syntax goes hand in hand with that. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to knowing your audience, right? If I'm sending something back to Jeremy on Twitter, and previous to what, a couple months ago, DMs were even limited to 140 characters. Like, I may have intentionally truncated things, but he would know what I was talking about, and we're talking to each other and we speak the same language, so it would be okay for me to do that. If I was making some bold proclamation on Twitter, I'm going to make sure that I'm using proper punctuation. And obviously, if I'm writing a blog post or something like that, I have the luxury of being able to have as many characters as I want, so I'll go ahead and do that. But a lot of it comes down to knowing your audience. So if you're interviewing somebody and you see that they're tweeting to their friends and they're using some slang or using shortened words or whatever, that doesn't matter. If they're doing that when they're just talking to the public, that's a different story.
I just want to say, from a voice output point of view, it's a much more challenging world where things, multiple compound words that are just frankly made up are very common. Things are mispronounced all the time. Talking about Twitter, I was following someone called Co-Depo8 for a very long time until I realized it was...
He's sitting right in front of you.
Yeah, Co-Poet. I know you can't have capitalization, which would help certainly with a speech output. And there was a lady called Donna Tripley who was working for a particular company I got lots of emails from. And then she moved to a different company, and I couldn't believe it. Well, is there two Donna Tripleys? And I finally got around to spelling out what that was, and of course it's do not reply.
Oh, nice. I did see a tweet from a copywriter recently who said she was surprised that copywriters don't get invited to more parties when they are such fun people out with whom to hang. Marek, yes, you had a question here.
Hi, I have a question to Robin and Aaron at the same time, I suppose. You mentioned using native date pickers and time pickers as an enhancement. I've been fighting these awful monsters for the last 2 years, especially on desktop, and My observation and the brief testing that we tried actually proves that these are awful experiences, especially on assistive technologies. But that may be just a narrow testing that we did. Did you have any experiences with, especially assistive technologies, to confirm or deny that?
I'll let Robin go first, since he's the native user as opposed to me, who just dips in and out.
I think expectation is quite important, and so consistency of what people experience. So if that's the common standard within people's experience within that particular context of a website, for example, then there is a lot of weight behind that. And we mentioned about user testing, and if you haven't got, everybody has budget for user testing. Nobody would put out a significant project or product without doing user testing. But we would argue that, if you've only got one budget, then make it disabled user testing, because you'll get, someone with dyslexia, 90% of what they show you, or what you find out in that user testing, will be exactly the same as somebody that doesn't have dyslexia. So that bit's covered, but you get the 10% of gold for, and similarly with people with a vision impairment, et cetera, et cetera. So, and the reason why I mention this is because user testing with disabled users or people with a range of impairments is really the only way. So we would definitely see at UAT that being the thing that would tell you whether you've made the right choices about very specific things like that. If they are going to be custom, though, if you can semantically make them appear as standard as possible for people who are, like myself, who's a screen reader user, that would be incredibly helpful as well.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I would really add is that these implementations, the native implementations in the browsers, are continuing to evolve, and I think there's been a big commitment from Apple, from Google, from Microsoft, especially within, I would say, the last year. It's picked up even more to making sure that what they're building and what they're delivering is accessible. So if you're relying on the native implementations, if there are accessibility issues now, my guess is that those are going to be addressed fairly quickly in the near future. And addressing them in one spot in the browser is way better than trying to address it in the myriad different JavaScript versions of a date picker or something of that nature. So I very much gravitate towards the native implementations whenever possible, because they've got more budget than most of the open source projects out there for trying to fix these things. And when they fix it, it fixes it for millions of people, as opposed to just the people who happen to be using that particular JavaScript library.
Okay, thank you.
Remy. Always has to have the final word. I was going to end it there. All right, give Remy the microphone.
It just occurred to me that we're using emojis a lot to communicate and express emotion, and it's a question for all three of you. Like, is using emojis good in copywriting? How would I express an emoji with voice, and what actually does an emoji come out as a screen reader? I've no idea. I mean, I look at the wall behind you, and there's just like emojis just mashed together. I mean, let alone made up words, you'll just get kind of thumb up. I don't even know what it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, what does an emoji sound like? I actually have never tried to listen to it in the screen reader.
A fire-up voiceover. I don't know if it's the same with iDevices these days, but you should be able to just triple-click the home button to bring up voiceover. I don't know if that's still the case. Do that, switch to the emoji keyboard, and every single one has been labeled with loving care, and that's consistent across all Apple ecosystems. The others vary slightly in how well they're labeled. Obviously, it's an international standard, and the metadata is there. So people just need to apply that in their particular platform. But yeah, smiling pile of poo.
Yes. That was what Remy was really asking about. He just wanted to make sure that came across. But it actually, the earlier question about, or what you were talking about earlier, Robin, not necessarily emojis, but I was thinking like hashtags. Like, because hashtags can't be multiple words, they end up running all together. That must just be abysmal.
Yeah, you just have to interrogate them a character at a time if it doesn't really make sense. Yeah.
In terms of good copywriting, there's Slack, for example, uses emojis a lot in their tweets and on their website, which fits their brand because emojis and that form of communication is used on the platform. Yeah. So I would say if it makes sense for your brand, then that's totally fine. And you'll see this a lot in social because there's a lot that can be communicated visually, and that will help because you can't communicate all of that in 140 characters, especially when you're writing. Sometimes you can't always convey feeling very easily, or intent or tone. So emojis are used as a way of lightening tone, but I wouldn't want that to be the case for every single medium. You know, I wouldn't want, just because you use a lot of emojis, because it's a part of your brand voice on social media, that doesn't necessarily mean I want to see it, you know, on your product page, or I don't want to see it in an email that, you know, is about billing or something like that. So,
We don't want to see
You don't want to
Gov-
read the emoji Moby Dick?
no, not really, or like, you owe money, smiley face. No, I'm good.
So thank you, Remy, for bringing the tone down to smiling pile of poo. Great. So with that, stay where you are. I will say please thank Robin and Aaron and Stephanie. Fantastic. And with that, my duties for the day are pretty much done. I just have one more thing to add, which was a little bit of a shout out to a website that just launched this morning that Jamie here just put out. It's progressiveenhancement.org. And the idea here is to have a place where you can see and submit patterns of progressive enhancement. I think this has been a great community event, and I would love to see this spirit of community continue. More events and also online, so progressiveenhancement.org, maybe that's going to be a good place to continue it. But the final word is going to go to Simon. Simon, come on up here and give us the final word, which I think involves beer.
Hello. I realise I'm the only thing between you and the pub now, so I'm going to try and be very quick. So I just want to say thank you to all for coming. It's been great having you all here. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Microsoft, InnoQ, Invika, Mozilla, CompWall, Sticker Mule, and The Guardian. Thank you to Jeremy for doing a wonderful job of the Q&A. Thank you to all our speakers as well, so Nat, Anna, Stefan, Forbes, Oliver, Stu, Phil and Stephen, Adam, Jen, Robin, Stephanie and Aaron. And Archie, who's done an amazing job as well. Thank you, Archie. Good boys. Thank you very much to the RSA for hosting us. Thank you for all of the people that have helped put on this conference. There's been an awful lot of you. Sophie, Ben, Fred, Andy, Ian, Phil, Paul, Aaron, and Jeremy. Everyone's been really helpful if you've been involved in any way, shape or form. Thank you very much. We've got winners to announce. The person that's won the book is Ollie Evans. Ollie has not just been tweeting about the conference, he's been live blogging the whole thing on JSBin. So there's a copy of Aaron's book for Ollie. I'll bring that over to you shortly. On the ebooks, we will reply to your tweets and we'll sort it out that way because we just have to send you the code basically. So we'll sort that afterwards so that you can get to the pub sooner. On your way in, you should have got a drinks voucher. That will get you a drink at the after party, which is just come out of here, turn right. The map's actually on the back of the drinks voucher. It's a 1-minute walk down that way. If you go upstairs, you'll be able to get a drink up there. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Simon.